Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Richard Morchoe, and the Long Hill Report, October edition. We have, of course, got Steeves here to speak with us as well. And we learned recently that the Trudeau regime in Canada is actually a front for Ukrainian fascists.
Just one of the fronts, apparently.
Mr. Trudeau shot himself in the foot
and jettisoned his Speaker of Parliament, or whatever he was.
Got rid of the poor Speaker of Parliament because there was a fellow who, old as he is, he was in the, I think it was the 14th Waffen SS Division, and they invited him up to the Canadian Parliament, and they all just cheered and cheered about him because he was fighting communism or something like that. Specifically
because he was killing the Russians.
Despite
the fact that he was wearing swastikas at the time.
He was also killing Poles and Jews.
Exactly.
But everything is good. It was all good.
It's all hunkadory.
Hunka, his name. Hunka, what was the Elvis song? Hunka Hunka Burning Love or something?
Something like that.
But so the poor speaker, I guess he kind of knew something, but he didn't know something, and he took the fall. And then Trudeau goes and says, yeah, we apologize, but it's the Russians. The Russians are bad. And because of this guy, we still have to fight the Russians. And does the world make any sense? No.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Now, I will give my take on recently and then you can give your take. The House Speaker in our country, who so far no House Speaker has cheered on Ukrainian SS volunteers.
Well, they did give a round of ovation to Zelensky and the Azov battalion that visited Congress about a year ago.
Well, that was, of course, Democrats who did that mostly.
Well, both
Republicans,
sides.
some did. But Pelosi wanted to kiss him. Anyway, so recently there was a coup in the House of Representatives where they kicked out what's his name?
Kevin McCarthy.
Kevin McCarthy, or whatever his name is, as Speaker. They basically said he was kind of soft and squishy. Now, I kind of actually, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, but I kind of applaud this because in the last, what do you call it, the budget that they passed, the 45-day budget, they cut out aid to the war, the proxy war in Ukraine, which has gone on too long, and we've wasted so much money, and we couldn't give anything but a pittance to the poor people in Maui.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
so now McCarthy was supposedly playing footsie and says, I'll get a special bill so we can send money to Ukraine. And I believe that something was behind that to his deposition, to his being deposed.
Oh, I'm sure it was. They openly said that it was.
And I applaud that.
Me too.
I applaud that. And the rebels, 8 of them, I guess, have done more good than all the Democrats and all the Republicans, other than them as Republicans.
And what's kind of scary is the fact that the ones who are primarily behind it, when it comes straight down to social policy, I tend to think that they're a little nuts. But I completely agree with this point, and that I think we absolutely need to. And I think it would be very interesting to see what kind of fallout effect this has on whether or not we can see somebody in Congress having enough guts to actually stop funding the war going forward, and what kind of ripple effect it will have on other countries. Because at the same time, we saw that Slovenia's presidency, I think whatever they call the title there, changed as well to somebody Slovakia, sorry, Slovakia, changed to somebody who was anti-war, against the war as well.
Yeah.
And there have been too many of our vassals in Europe that will do whatever the corporate interests want, which usually means more war. And that's interesting. That ties right into one of the things I wanted to talk about briefly. Did you see the blurb? I don't know if you see the Washington Post. I've seen several people commenting on it in the last week or so. From a rather notorious neocon Max Boot, claiming that the Ukrainian war is a great investment because it's killing people and destroying things at no cost to the U.S., conveniently because specifically Russians, conveniently leaving out the massive death toll and the destructions to the Ukrainians.
Well, Max Boot
hasn't seen a war he didn't like in a long time.
Oh, he saw many he didn't like to serve in.
Well, servant, yes.
Is a neocon's neocon.
Yeah.
Bill Kristol, a few of the other ones. They were more Republicans than the Republicans when they pushed neoconservatism,
Yep.
which just meant war. It didn't mean conservatism is basically a reaction to an ideology or to another movement. It basically doesn't have an ideology. But it was, it was kind of hijacked by Buckley, William F. Buckley, and and then there were other people in the New York area. Irving Kristol, Bill Kristol's father, they would say things like, a conservative is a liberal that has been mugged in New York City. Just something to justify their going to a war party.
Oh, yeah, right.
And now that Trump, whatever you want to say about Trump, he was not he did some very bad war things.
Yeah.
But he was not the warmonger that Hillary Clinton was, that the Bushes are. I assume they still are.
Yeah, as far as I've seen, they haven't changed.
Or Joe Biden. He wasn't in that league. And, he's not my cup of tea for president. There's other people, I think Justin Amash, if you told me I had to pick the president, I'd probably pick Justin Amash. But nobody's going to ask me.
Nope.
But
or me.
If you put a gun to my head, please don't, and say, all right, you have to choose between Hillary and Trump, I'll choose Trump. If you had between Joe and Trump, I'd pick Trump. Please don't do this. I'll probably die of fright by the time we got to the end of your list.
And of course, it's interesting you mentioned that because do you ever read John Michael Greer?
I have long time ago, but not.
Because he's been doing his Echo Sophia blog much more recently, and this week's column is actually interesting specifically about that, where he's talking about what he's describing as political magic. He's a Druid, but this particular situation, he's talking about how the Democrats and the Republicans, to a large degree over the last several decades, have been so focused on hating the other party that they don't have any positive imagery to project to the public themselves. And in this case, his argument is that one of the things that keeps Trump going, essentially, from a more not personal psychological, but from a big picture psychological point of view, is the idea that he's getting so much energy from the Democrats focusing so much of their animosity on him that it basically fuels his staying in the public realm.
Oh yeah.
And if they were actually to focus on having a good policy that actually mattered and actually was a positive vision for the rest of the country, it would basically drain it away from him, and they may actually go somewhere.
That's.
I think and that should be common sense politics.
Well, it
in many
respects. Degree, but take away Trump, and they're just hating each other.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And
I agree.
When do they stop that? It's not Trump being there that causes this. It's that they've been pulling this stunt for quite a while.
Oh, I agree.
No, they could agree on war.
They
could agree on war.
Well, they've been able to agree on policies that don't benefit the people. They have their basic policies for the two major parties are largely the same. There's a little bit of fudging over here, a little bit of fudging over here, but the major things that they advocate for over the years have been corporate consolidation, making government bigger in the areas that they want it to be bigger in, more and more wars.
What areas, other than military, and do the Republicans want to grow government in?
They seem to be wanting it to grow it in the amount of corruption that they have, the amount of money they're getting out of it.
Policy-wise,
That is policy. I mean, think about it.
No,
the laws that they do are about this thick, and nobody reads them.
It's usually camouflaged.
Oh, sure it is.
But
I agree with that.
It's the Democrats that have, we want free this, free that, free that, free,
And the problem is that's camouflage too, because that's what they say, but that's not what they actually do.
They do.
They have all of these things that they say they want to do for the environment or for the people, the poor people, or whatever their cause du jour of the week is. But it ends up being so wrapped around in red tape that the people who would benefit from it, if it actually made sense, often can't get to it. And then you've got circumstances where the environmentals, for example, the environmental issues that they often do a lot of flag waving over, end up being trampled by what they actually do, such as giving oil leases and then withdrawing them and giving them again and then withdrawing them and giving them over here and putting them over there and finagling the laws that don't actually do anything. Like Medicare negotiation for drugs, when there's tens of thousands of them and they say, we'll negotiate over these 10. It makes it look good and it means nothing.
It's probably more or less true, but that's the Democrats. The Republicans will say, well, let's halt on this. Let's halt on that. But they'll support the military.
Exactly.
That's their big thing. They
do that. Very much so.
But the Democrats will out jingo. I mean, I think I was Jim McGovern's constituent.
Yeah.
And I believe I'm Neil's.
Yeah, I think you are. I think it's different.
I questioned him. I emailed his office, and they started sending me something. And then the war started. I got one of them from, "Let me be clear, I've always been for peace."
And then you proceed to vote on sending weapons to Ukraine.
But yes, and that's a peace Democrat.
Yeah, I know.
And Liz Warren, I don't think she's ever really spoken up for peace. But she's wanted to spend money for every little. Now, I'm going to go and touch a third rail. Student loans.
Okay.
Forgive them? I have a problem with that. I mean, Joe Blow, who went up to Bay Path, he doesn't get a student loan. He's going to be wealthy because he took plumbing, and that was a lot smarter than taking identity studies at some
Harvard or wherever.
Whether it's Harvard or whether it's East Overshoe Community College, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
But at Harvard, there's a little wiggle room there because you can get into an administration from Harvard.
Well, most of those big name schools, that's the only reason they're there.
Yeah.
Because you get the connections and it gives you the name itself often gets you through the door. It doesn't matter how well you do there.
I don't know.
As long as you don't fail out and get arrested.
I don't know if you
and even then sometimes that happens.
have ever read or heard about Brian Kaplan's The Case Against Education.
I think I read parts of it a long time ago.
He basically said the only benefit to education is the signal.
Yeah.
That you're going to Harvard. Almost all of us. Almost all of us, all we can do is read and write and do up to long division. That's about it. Now, let's go head to head on an algebra contest, because I don't remember any of
I
it.
don't either.
And,
So we would do equally well.
and it was a waste of time
Yeah.
for me to study it. I wish I had studied it better, because I'd like to, and there's actually parts of it I remember, you know. And geometry too, I thought that was spiffy. Never did anything with it.
No.
Never will do anything with it.
I mean, most of that kind of stuff is important to be there, and it's important to be teaching them, because it might encourage people to go farther if they're really drawn to it. But on average, the average person doesn't really need most of it.
Well, the purpose of American public school now is as the default babysitter.
Largely, yeah. Next to television.
But, well, that's only after they, you know, mom and dad are usually there when the television is on. But during the day,
Hopefully.
during the day, got to have some place to put the kids. So mom and dad
Right.
can go out and work to put food on the table.
Yeah, I know.
And you know, my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and she said, "I was so glad when you kids came along and I could quit work and be the mom at home." She enjoyed it. She loved it.
Honestly, we should be encouraging that
But
in so many ways.
but
But our society does everything it can to undermine
And
the
part-
ability of families to do that.
part of that, the biggest part, because as we were discussing in the previous show, is inflation. I would say that's the biggest mover in that.
It's probably a factor in it.
Well, no.
I think that there's a lot of other things going on.
Name a bigger factor.
I said I'm not sure, to be honest with you. But I think it is probably a factor in it. I think a lot of the wars are a factor in it. I think a lot of the other stuff that is going on.
How do you put the war?
The cost of oil and the cost of fuel is certainly a factor.
That's
in it.
inflation.
That's a major factor. I
That's
think it's
inflation.
underlying it is oil.
And underlying it is the spending, really.
Well, in many
inflation is
respects,
a
yes.
system of taxation.
Well, yeah, obviously.
But I like to see how the wars cause the two-parent family to have two parents working.
Well, I think it's not so much directly related, but I think it's a part of the fact that when it comes to wars and conflicts, you are taking so much away from the ability of the community at home to support people, so that if your resources are going to, in this case, Ukraine, and some of your people are going to Ukraine, in our case, hopefully American people aren't there, but we know some of them are. Or in any other parts of the world where we have so many forces in various parts of the world doing something that they shouldn't really be there for. That's taking people away from the communities and taking resources away from the communities that might otherwise enable people at home to focus more, say, on taking care of their kids.
And that is the war aspect of it.
Among other things, yes.
Is a part, and maybe even the major part of the inflation.
That seems to what happened. If you look at it through history, those kinds of wars going on have a tendency to undermine the fiscal stability of countries that they're in, that are involved in wars. Almost always. They claim, you see claims that it props up the economy, but that only has a short-term positive effect. In the long term, it undermines the economy.
It absolutely. I did an article for a paper about a company that was well-respected in one town. And I thought, yeah, hey, boy, there's not that many of those factories around anymore.
Right.
So I did the article. It was a defense contractor. I didn't know it was before I went. I kind of thought it probably was as I started doing research to go in there. Yeah, I kind of caught on. But all along the road, it's in southwestern Quabog region. There were factories. In fact, one of them probably 10, 15 years ago was still working.
Yeah.
Still working. gone.
Oh, yeah.
They're all gone. And part of it is the warfare economy,
Mm-hmm.
but also, they could have a non-warfare economy and still waste enough money.
In some cases, I think that's
But they'd
true.
have to work a little harder.
Yeah, in some
Or
cases
maybe a
that's true,
lot
but
of
I think by definition, the whole point of the war is to waste things, literally.
So that they
So you can destroy them, so you can rebuild them, so you can destroy
that
them
is,
again.
that is, oh, that is a
supposedly.
big, and that is
That
certainly,
is by definition waste.
that is certainly a big aspect of Ukraine.
Yes, no question.
Okay, let's just go in a little speculation here. That say, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen, say Ukraine smashes through the Russian army,
Yes.
and the Russian army completely retreats over the border, and and basically puts up the white flag, and we have the end of that war.
Mm-hmm.
What is the next war? China?
That seems to be what they're trying to do. The problem is there are so many possible flashpoints going on in the world right now. Who knows which one will actually catch fire?
Well, they're not. They can't have a big war in Africa. You can have a good-sized war, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you'll have anybody fighting with more than 25,000 troops.
Probably not. But you could have another major war in the Middle East. There's always
when I
sparking
say
going
Africa
on
above
there.
the Sahara and include West Asia, and that I'm no fan of the Iranian regime, but it obviously fudges elections probably, but it's not my business.
Our elections get fudged all the time too. So I think most of the major countries fudge their elections to a certain
Well, that's why I told you about the Dick and I. I said we got to stop this. We're not really having an election.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I've written about was I investigated McConnell and Schumer.
Oh, okay.
They both got money from, I think it was probably a Soros-backed thing.
That doesn't surprise me.
$400,000. What is the joke here?
Actually, that makes me think of something that I saw a couple days ago. Was you've heard of Governor Youngkin in Virginia, right? And this, I think, it's just symbolic because it happens all the time. But there was something very specifically, a headline from one of their Virginia newspapers said, billionaire gives Youngkin's PAC like $2 million. And my immediate look at that, just without even reading the articles, how is that not just outright corruption?
Well,
and they're all doing that.
Well, okay. If somebody, the president or the company of, say, Lockheed, gives money to a candidate's campaign, that's a bribe.
Exactly. That's my point. That's my point. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's blatant corruption.
It's always a bribe. So I mean,
but the problem
when
is
all
the
these
way
people were saying our democracy
exactly.
and rules-based order.
It's not our democracy. It's theirs.
It's not a democracy.
No, it's not. It's an oligarchy. It's a corrupt oligarchy. And that's part of the problem is that they've defined the corruption to make stuff like that legal. When they should be going to prison for a very long time.
Oh, they're keeping us safe.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
So,
anyway, a minute ago you were saying something about Iran.
Iran?
Yeah.
Not my business. I wasn't saying. I said, I don't. I'm not an Iran scholar.
No, I wasn't saying about that. But you were going to say something about the potential flashpoint. Because I mentioned that the Middle East was a potential flashpoint.
Oh yeah,
you were going to follow up on something about that.
We're continuing to bug Iran.
Yeah.
We had that thing with we're ransoning their sailors by giving them their money,
right.
which we stole.
Yeah.
It's just part of it. But we focus on Iran. Why do we focus on Iran?
Because the Israelis want us to.
Basically, yeah.
And sometimes the Saudis want us to. Although they're now working much more closely than they used to.
The Saudis, Well, how can we like the Saudis? I mean, when they kill people at their border,
It's all about money.
Yeah.
It's all about oil
Yeah.
specifically, which is ironic since that we support the Saudis for their oil and we hate the Iranians for their oil.
We hate them.
And the
because-
Russians for their oil.
Yeah.
And some of these other countries for
But
their oil.
we-
Something is wrong with this picture here.
You know, the Saudis are probably the worst element. It's a tiny oligarchy there. That, but there are a lot of the faithful who support them because they are representatives of the religion, and they keep Mecca sacrosanct.
Well, the problem is that if you look at it from the Muslims' point of view themselves, even they are on the outskirts of Islam, because their Wahhabi faith is a fringe concept throughout most of Muslim history. The vast majority of the people in the rest of the Muslim world are not at all Wahhabi.
What are they?
They're a variety of different things.
So
but
they probably, I'll tell you, I am sure they trust Wahhabis far more than they do the Pope.
Oh, no question about that, yes. And they trust Wahhabis far more than they do the Americans.
Yes,
There's no
yes.
question about that.
So it doesn't matter to them that much that it is a Wahhabi government. They'd rather say that they're Sufi government or their Shia government. They'd rather that be maybe running Saudi Arabia, but what the heck?
Well, the most important thing is, I think, as far as that goes, is as long as they maintain something that resembles continuity and security for Mecca and Medina.
Yeah.
Any country, any Muslim government throughout history that was unable to do that tended to disintegrate really quickly.
And I think that whether it's MBS or anybody else in the ruling family of,
Right.
they understand that.
Oh, absolutely they do.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they know that is what they have. But they throw us aside for the Chinese in a trice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we solved that. But I think I just want to bug out.
Out of
yeah.
Ukraine, you mean?
Yeah, well, that definitely. I want to bug out of NATO.
Oh, yeah.
I want to bug out of Iran. Because anybody who believes that if Russia conquers the Ukrainian army,
Which they will.
they will then rush into Poland, go through Germany, go through France, take over the French fleet, and maybe cross over to England, take over the British fleet,
Yeah.
come over, land on Cape Cod, eat all the, go to all the clam shacks and eat all the fried clams they can, and then rush to the Mississippi, cross the Mississippi, and take
then
over
the
the whole.
Chinese.
No, the Chinese may come from the
That's
west.
my point. There were no Chinese in there
So
somewhere.
we're in a big pinchers movement here. Anybody who believes that, please,
Has been playing too many crazy video games.
please go to your doctor and demand a government-subsidized lobotomy. You need it quickly.
The problem is those are the people that are running the government and saying it.
They do not really believe that.
I hope not. But I think there's a few of them. The problem is that they say it enough that there's a few people that have some influence
Okay.
that seem to be believing it and doing things that will.
Blinken. Take Blinken.
one of them.
What do you say? Think he believes that, or just is just his Pollock thing?
I think he's a psychopath and I have no idea what he's talking about.
What?
I think he's a psychopath and he has no idea what he's talking about. And I don't know half of the time what he's talking about.
I
He
would
says
say,
a lot of stuff that has no semblance of reality.
So you think he might believe that the Russians can cross the Atlantic?
No, I doubt that.
Okay.
But I think he may believe that the Russians are aiming to take over the rest of Europe, and I don't think there's any evidence that they are.
Well, I'm going to go out on another limb here. I'm going to paint a target on my chest. They can have Europe. Because I read somewhere where de Gaulle had said to Churchill really after World War II when he was still in government before he left for a while, the Russians are here. He said, Churchill said they're going to loosen up, that they can't handle it. And what did Russia agree to? Neutrality for Austria, neutrality for Finland, and they never went any further west.
Exactly.
And so I think Russia has a kind of idea of a homeland.
They do.
And a near abroad.
They do.
I don't think they want to go any further.
I don't think they do
Because
either.
historically they never have.
Right, exactly, which is interesting because the people who know very little about history are constantly spouting the nonsense that they would do something like that. I mean, they did occupy Paris at the time of Napoleon.
Well,
But they went home soon thereafter.
But
They just
remember
finished
now,
off the war and that was it.
remember now, they were reacting, though that was a complete reaction to Napoleon
I agree.
going to Moscow.
I totally agree with that.
Oh, you did Moscow, well, we'll go Paris.
I totally got
Yeah.
it. I understand that completely.
It wasn't like they said, we're going to, like, what was it, that movie, it was one of the two Beatles movie, Victor Spinetti says, dare I say it, I could rule the world.
Oh, okay.
If I had that, I could rule the world. This is the fantasy land. However, we've reached fantasy land on the clock. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I know we were a little soporific here and kind of quiet and shy. Well, this is Richard Morchoe, Gus Steeves,
Have a great
saying
night.
thank you for coming to the Long Hill Report.